Welcome back to Hope for Today. My name is Lynn Wilson, and as always, I'm glad you're joining me today. I hope today is something that God wants you to hear. So last week we were talking about your burned out bulb and not being plugged into the Lord and not, letting your life shine for the Lord, that they could see Jesus in you, that they could just be drawn to you to want to know more about the Lord and all of that. So today I want to talk about, are you walking in circles due to a lack of faith? I love the story of Moses. There's so many layers to Moses. I actually, I'm studying it on a personal level right now because there are some of the stories I'm a little confused on chronologically when they happened, and did this happen or how did it, and I need to brush up on my Moses. And so I want to talk about in the next couple of podcasts different parts of Moses' life that really pertain to our lives and how and what we can learn from him, the Israelites, and some of the things that happened. And as always, I tell you, my podcasts are not, digging deep in the Word or heavy duty. Mine are just very basic, practical, everyday tips, a verse or two that you can just take and chew on for the week and grow and learn. And I don't do anything complicated. I just like things simple. That's who I am. If you know me off camera, I'm just a very basic, simple person. I don't like complicated. And the older I get, the less complicated I want life. So we're going to talk about, are you working in circles due to lack of faith? So when Moses led the Israelites, and they were, he freed them. We'll go back a little bit in another podcast, but he freed them from Egypt. And they had all these things that they could look back on and refer to and ponder on and meditate on of all the wonderful things God has done and has said he would do, and he did keep his promises. And yet they ended up in the wilderness for 40 years. And while they were there, they complained and they murmured about their situation the whole time. You know anybody like that? You know anybody that constantly complains? Can you raise your hand? Yeah. Just when I think I'm not a complainer, I listen to myself and I'm like, did you say anything positive today? Did you say anything uplifting today? Or did you just complain about everything? I've talked about this in other podcasts, and I'm sure we all have friends and family or neighbors, acquaintances, coworkers, whatever you want to call it, that you could put in that category, and of people who complain about everything. They complain when it's too hot. They complain it's too cold. The sun is too bright. There's not enough sun. It rained too much. We never get snow. And then we get the snow. They complain it's turning to ice. I always joke with people, sort of joke, And there's never really a joke or a tease. There's always a message behind it. We live here, I live in the state of New Jersey. There's 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. And when we have summer, people complain it's too hot. And then when we have winter, they complain it's too cold. And I'm like, if you don't like the winter, then move to a place that doesn't have any winter. And if it's too hot, move to a place that's cooler. Really, we live here. You've chosen to live here. Maybe you haven't chosen. You're stuck here. Make the best of it. Stop complaining. So I want to sit here and just talk about 2 lessons today that I think we can get out of this portion of Scripture where Moses was working with the Israelites in the wilderness. Number 1, are you a complainer? Are you like the Israelites that murmured and complained about everything and literally and figuratively and spiritually and every other way walked in circles for 40 years because of their unfaithfulness to the Lord? But the Bible tells us in that 40 years, Moses remained focused, loyal, and faithful to God the entire time in those 40 years. So my next lesson, or point, if you want to say, first one was, are you the complainer like the Israelites, or are you the Moses? Are you the one being faithful? Are you the one being loyal to what God has told you and called you to do? I can't even imagine what it is to be a pastor or a leader of a Christian ministry, a leader of a home, a Christian home, a leader that for 40 years, I mean, one day alone, if I work with people in ministry and, whether it's at church or my family or here at work or wherever, and everybody's complained. Ugh. I go home and I tell my husband, I'm done. That's it. I've had it. I've had a bad day. And that's one day. What was it like for 40 years? And I'm dealing with a handful of people. He was dealing with how many people? All those Israelites. They murmured and they complained. I can't even imagine. I'd be like, would you get a life? Like, come on. We got to get, I'd like to get out of this wilderness just as much as you. But it says Moses remained focused, loyal, and faithful to God. Are you a Moses? In spite of the negativity, in spite of the harsh words, in spite of the put downs, in spite of the lack of, what would you say, get up and go? Like, are you ready? Can we do this? And wah, 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 wah. Like Charlie Brown, and you just hear the school teacher, wah, wah, wah. That's what it sounds like after a while. I had a grandmother-in-law that no matter what she was going through, and she had been through some humdinger things, no matter what, she would answer, I just need to be faithful. It's not my job to get the job done. My job is to be faithful. Oh, and you get annoyed with people like that, or that are so religious that they got it all together. Well, she was a very humble lady, very tough cookie. She was a missionary, and I remember when she was I remember the story. When she was pregnant with my father-in-law, she had black water fever, which we don't hear about those things where we are, but very ill, fever, the whole thing. And she was pregnant with my father-in-law, and they had to put her in a canoe that they dig out. The natives where she was a missionary took a tree and dug it out, created a canoe of sorts. I don't remember what river, but whatever river it was, she had to leave in the middle of the night. Now this is 80 plus years ago. There weren't street lights, there wasn't email, there wasn't phone calls, text, cell phones. There wasn't a way of contacting anybody other than the few natives that were in the area. And my grandfather-in-law had to stay back to maintain the village. She had to get in this canoe with natives that she had to trust. And you couldn't sit because it was so narrow, the canoe. It was a log, basically. They had to stand in a canoe in the pitch black, go down the river to get to the next village to hopefully find someone there to take her to a hospital to deliver this baby safely while she had black water fever. She had to stand in a canoe. If any women are out there that have ever been in labor can only imagine being in labor, praying that the baby isn't born, while having black water fever, in a canoe, in a river, in the pitch black, in a river where there were crocodiles and snakes and things that you just don't want to know about. And they had no way of defending themselves other than maybe a spear or something like that. Well, my father-in-law was born, healthy as all get out. My mother-in-law lived through the black water fever. And all of them lived a rich, full life into, much older age. But they served the Lord faithfully. And she would say, it's not my job to get the job done. It's my job to remain faithful. What are you complaining about today? What has got you so wound up that you can't stop complaining? I know people that complain so much that they complain about their own complaining. You know what I mean? They're just so going in circles through this wilderness. They're in their own wilderness. How many people do you know for years are sitting in the same thing? And you're going, if you would just move over. Like when a bird hits the window? You ever had that? Clunk, clunk, clunk. And you're like, go over there, stop it. You're doing the same thing over and over. And it's getting you absolutely nowhere. What does complaining do? Stop complaining. Listen, if you're in a bad situation and if you want to say it warrants the complaint, okay, go to somebody with your complaint, let it be known, and then just be faithful. It's not your job to change it. I don't know. Maybe God's got you there for a purpose. Now here Moses is leading them, and he's not the one complaining, but God still had him in the wilderness with these Israelites because God called him to bring them out of that wilderness. God made him the leader of these people that just didn't know how to get it on and get through life. They just complained. But Moses could have said the same thing and complained that, why do you have me here? I'm the one being right, and I'm the one doing all the right things, and you have me in a situation that's, I'm stuck with all these people. But God had him in that position. Like my grandmother-in-law would say, it was his job to be faithful. It wasn't his job to get the job done. That was God's job. God was working through that. God had a purpose in that. We don't always see it. I've prayed about things. I don't know that I've prayed for something for 40 years. Maybe I have, but like 40 years to be in the wilderness, even there, God provided their needs. So, where are you at right now? Where are you at? Are you a complainer or are you the Moses? So again, just like last week, you gotta let your light shine. I don't know where you're at. Like I said, you might be going through the toughest thing. You gotta be faithful. I don't know what God's doing. I don't know why God chooses to do what he does. I don't know. Someday when we get to glory, we'll go, oh, now that makes sense. So, are you a complainer or are you a Moses? Are you walking in circles in your own wilderness because of the constant complaining that you're doing? Maybe you've not plugged in like we talked last week. You're not plugged in. You're not getting that energy from the Lord. You're not getting that word from the Lord, the wisdom from the Lord, the joy from the Lord, that strength from the Lord, all those things that you need. So there's 2 verses I want to read to you. Exodus 33:11 says, "So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend." Now, we'll go into another podcast exactly what that verse is referring to, but as a man speaks to his friend, when the Lord spoke to Abraham, it was that type of relationship. Here it says, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as he speaks to his friend. Can the Lord say that about you? Do you feel that kind of relationship with the Lord? Like, if the Lord showed up today and said, hey, Lynn, walk to my office. My door's right over here. Walk to my office. Hey, I got a job for you. Just like if, my boss came, I'd say, sure, what do you need? The Lord came in, would I say, sure, what do you need? And he says, well, I need you to move to a rural area, and it's a crime-infested area, and I need you to work in missions there. Me? I got a house. No, you just said, what can I do for you? The Lord will ask us to do things and to give up things and to whatever the case might be, because he has a work for us to do that he doesn't need somebody else to do. He needs Lynn to do that, or he never would have asked me to do it, and he never would have created me, because he created me for a purpose, and that purpose is to serve him with my gifts and abilities that I have that he wants to use for his service. You see how this is all connected? Deuteronomy 34:10, promise we're almost done. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. They had such a relationship. Wow. Do you have that relationship? Are you faithful and loyal to the Lord that he can say something like this? Due to the lack of faith in God's ability to give them the promised land, they walked around the wilderness because of their complaining and lack of faith. Don't be an Israelite. Be a Moses. Let your light shine like we talked about last week. Stop your murmuring, stop your complaining, and get yourself out of the wilderness and start being a faithful Moses. And like my grandmother-in-law said, it's my job to be faithful. It's not my job to get the job done. All right, guys, we'll catch you all next week, and we're going to continue talking about the life of Moses.